They say the deep sea hides secrets darker than the blackest night. Beneath the crushing weight of the ocean, where no light dares to tread, horrors stir. But what if the terror wasn't a creature of flesh and bone? What if it was something far worse? Ghosts of the drowned, their wrath bubbling up like toxic fumes, hungry for vengeance. Tonight, we'll plunge into the chilling depths where a diver uncovered a graveyard of restless souls. Spirits of the murdered, tethered to the ocean floor, dragging the living down into their watery hell. Before we dive into this bone-chilling tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that will keep you awake at night. Now, let's take the plunge into the Phantom Abyss. Mark Tanner wasn't just any diver. His reputation was built on his willingness to go where no one else dared, a modern-day explorer of the unknowable abyss. Yet, the expedition to Nova Scotia felt different from the start. The briefing had been terse, almost secretive. The salvage company, an organization shrouded in corporate obscurity, wanted whatever was emitting the anomalous signal. No questions asked. They paid well, enough to silence Mark's unease. The dive began like many others. As his submersible was lowered into the water, the sunlight dissolved into a darkening blue haze. The ocean had a way of swallowing light, sound, and time itself. This far from shore, surrounded by endless water, Mark felt like he was sinking into another world. At 3,000 feet, the ocean's silence became oppressive. The only sounds were the gentle hum of his craft and the rhythmic blips of the sonar. He checked the instruments. The coordinates were correct, but there was no wreckage or debris on the screens. Instead, the sonar picked up something strange. A vast circular depression, far too symmetrical to be natural. What the hell is that? Mark muttered to himself. His external lights pierced the dark water, revealing jagged edges around the pit's lip. The trench seemed alive, breathing shadows into the void. An unnatural cold seeped through the submersible's hull, biting even through his thermal suit. And then came the noise. A faint hum at first, like distant machinery, growing into a chorus of distorted whispers. It seemed to resonate within the craft, vibrating against the very core of Mark's skull. His hands trembled as he adjusted the sonar. The depression wasn't just a hole. It was surrounded by irregular formations. Bones. Endless bones scattered across the seabed like pale confetti. As Mark drew closer, the submersible's lights revealed the true horror of the scene. Skeletons lay tangled in nets and rusting chains, their forms grotesquely twisted as though frozen in the throes of death. Some bore signs of horrific injuries, cracked skulls, shattered ribs, while others seemed eerily intact, the flesh long dissolved but their agony somehow preserved. Mark's breathing quickened, fogging the visor of his helmet. This wasn't in the job description, he muttered, forcing himself to focus. The pit below seemed to pulsate with an energy of its own, like the mouth of a living beast. The first figure appeared on the periphery of his lights, a faint, translucent outline drifting toward the pit. At first, Mark thought it was a trick of the light, but then another appeared, and another, until dozens of them formed a pale, glowing procession. The figures seemed to weep as they moved, their mouths open in silent screams. "Surface, are you seeing this?" Mark's voice cracked as he radioed the team. "Seeing what?" Sarah, the surface operator, sounded irritated. "Your camera feeds all static." Mark's blood ran cold. The ghosts grew bolder, edging closer to the submersible. One, a woman with hollow, eyeless sockets and hair streaming like ink in water, pressed her face against the viewport. Her gnarled fingers scratched the glass, leaving trails of frost. Mark jerked the controls, backing the submersible away. But the sonar screamed in protest. Something massive was rising from the pit, an undulating cloud of spectral forms. They moved as one, swirling around the submersible in a whirlpool of death. Mark could feel their rage, their despair, clawing at his sanity. Mark returned to the surface, shaken and pale. The footage from his cameras was corrupted beyond repair, and the salvage company brushed off his concerns. "Malfunction," they insisted, but Mark couldn't forget what he had seen, or what he had heard. The whispers followed him, invading his dreams, a relentless reminder of the horrors below. Desperate for answers, Mark began researching the region. Local fishermen spoke in hushed tones about the Wailing Pit, a cursed trench where ships vanished and sonar equipment failed. It was a place avoided even by seasoned mariners. Mark's investigation led him to a grisly discovery. In the 1980s, the area had been a dumping ground for a serial killer named Harold Grayson. Grayson, a fisherman by trade, had lured victims to his boat under the guise of adventure tours. Once at sea, he tortured and killed them, binding their bodies in chains and dumping them into the trench. Though Grayson had been executed for his crimes, his victims were never recovered. Mark realized with mounting horror that the spirits he had seen weren't just ghosts. They were Grayson's victims, their souls tethered to the abyss where they had been discarded. Their wrath was palpable, their suffering eternal. Mark couldn't let it rest. He equipped his submersible with experimental hydrophones and spectral imaging technology, determined to return to the pit. The ocean felt colder this time, its silence heavier, as though the abyss itself resented his intrusion. The hydrophone crackled to life as he descended. At first, the noises were indistinct, low moans and whispers that seemed to ebb and flow like the tides. But as he neared the pit, the voices grew clearer. "You left us," one voice accused. It was high-pitched, childlike, yet filled with venom. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. "We are the Forgotten," came the reply. The hydrophone hissed with static before another voice, deeper and more resonant, spoke. "Bring him to us." "Grayson?" Mark asked, his throat dry. "No." The voices hissed in unison. "The living who left us here." Mark's blood ran cold. The ghosts didn't just want vengeance on Grayson. They wanted retribution against a world that had ignored their cries. Mark wasn't the only one affected. Nearby fishing vessels began reporting strange phenomena. Lights flickering beneath their hulls, unearthly screams reverberating through their sonar. Entire crews disappeared without a trace. The Wailing Pit seemed to be expanding its reach, pulling the living into its fold. In his final dive, Mark witnessed the pit's hunger firsthand. As he descended, he saw the mangled remains of a fishing vessel, its hull crushed as though by an enormous hand. The ghosts swarmed the wreckage, dragging its crew into the abyss. Mark's submersible shuddered violently, systems failing one by one. The last image his cameras captured was a massive shadow rising from the pit, a figure so large it seemed to blot out the ocean itself. Mark's scream echoed through the static-filled feed before it cut to black. Mark's disappearance was the final straw for those who knew him. His colleagues pieced together his recordings, trying to make sense of his warnings. His last message was chilling. They're not just spirits. They're part of something older, something ancient. The pit isn't a grave, it's a mouth. And it's hungry. To this day, no one dares approach the Wailing Pit. Fishermen whisper of ghostly lights dancing in the deep, and sailors swear they hear screams carried on the wind. The abyss remains uncharted, its secrets buried beneath layers of water and bone. But one thing is certain: those who venture too close never return. The sea doesn't forgive, and the dead don't forget. Did this story send chills down your spine? If so, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of terror from the unknown. And remember, the next time you're near the water, beware of what lies beneath. The abyss is watching.